Hello everyone, my name is PJ and welcome to The Void. It's Crash Bandicoot season, and to kick things off, I thought I'd revisit my thoughts and opinions regarding the original trilogy real quick. I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I really do not like the original Crash Bandicoot all that much. The stiff controls, ridiculous saving mechanics, and punishing deaths are just too much for me, which is why I find the remake to be much better, and the good design elements of the original are finally able to shine through in it. I should like Crash 2 and its remake more than I do, since the gameplay and structure are virtually identical to Crash 3, but I consider the level design to be significantly less fair. What with its impossibly cryptic secrets and parts where you have to go backwards with the camera right in your face, it's just not fun for me. And then there's Crash 3, which I have always considered one of my all-time favorite games. The remake is practically identical in quality, with some pro-con differences here and there, but they're both amazing. The only things I don't like are the time trials, which you have to do to get the secret ending. Except for Coco stages. Those are fun. Time trials are pretty much the only thing keeping it from being a 10 out of 10 for me. Which I should mention, I changed the definition for 10 out of 10. Now we'll have to talk about that some other time. Anyway, let's move on to the first sequel following the trilogy. Crash Team Racing was the last game made by Naughty Dog, not because they wanted it to be the last, but because the IP was being forcibly taken from them by Universal Studios. There's a rumor going around now that Naughty Dog made a ridiculous non-sequitur kart racer for Crash with an alien as its antagonist because they wanted to run Crash Bandicoot's reputation into the ground before passing it on to the next unlucky step. But I don't know how much I buy that story. First, if you wanted to ruin Crash's reputation, why didn't you just end off on Crash 3 and hope the next company would never be able to live up to its glory? Which, they never did, by the way. Second, if you wanted to ruin Crash's reputation, then why did you make one of the best and most beloved kart racers of all time? Yes, Mario Kart and Diddy Kong Racing were already a thing by then, but CTR redefined the genre and paved the way for future kart racers. Power sliding? CTR invented it. Anti-gravity stages? Crash Nitro Kart did it before Mario. CTR is considered by many to be the king of kart racers, which is why they make up such a large percentage of Crash sequels. So what do I think of it? Well, I'm sorry to say, but out of all the Crash racing games I've beaten so far, I ended up liking the original CTR the least. Let me start with an overview. First off, the graphics aren't terrible for PS1, but since the environments are fully 3D this time, they can't pull as many camera tricks as they did before, so there's less overall detail. That unfortunately makes it the worst looking of the Crash games we've covered so far, but it's still not terrible. Though it is really unnerving how Coco seems to have huge buck teeth in her kart model. Ugh. Also, a really cool trick that I never noticed until recently was that the wheels of the carts are actually 2D sprites. Since they're round, their perspective isn't affected by elevation, so they just turn with the cart. That's pretty neat. The manual for the game actually surprised me. Normally, only greatest hits copies come with color manuals, but my Black Label copy is in color too. I'm really impressed by this manual. It teaches you everything that the game does and then some. At the time of my writing this, I've already finished playing the remake, but it was only this very moment that I learned that these floating lightning balls are called warp orbs, or exactly what it is that super engines do. Cortex... Never mind, you look fabulous.
I'm so pretty!
Also, I don't know if the manual writers realized what they did, but this screenshot captures the exact frame that the 5th place racer passed the 4th place racer. If you want to know the story without reading the manual, you have to wait at the title screen for the cutscene that explains it. It doesn't play when you start the adventure mode. Crash 1 also did this, and it was stupid then too. An alien named nitrous oxide has challenged Earth's inhabitants to a racing tournament, and if they lose, the planet will be renovated into a parking lot, presumably for spaceships. And that's it. For some reason, all the main characters of the Crash series are amazing racers now, so they all decide to participate. When you start Adventure Mode, you are given a choice of 8 characters, 2 from each engine class. Crash and Cortex are balanced, Coco and N-Gin focus on acceleration, Tiny and Dingodile focus on speed, and Polar and Pura focus on turning. Oh, sorry, did I forget to mention that the 2 non-mutant animals from Crashes 2 and 3 are racers? Well, if Pura can drive a space dig, I suppose a go-kart's no problem for him. But seriously, why Polar and Pura? Were you that desperate for good-aligned characters to fill the roster? Why not Tana and Embryo? At least that way you'd have more than one female character. The person you choose for Adventure Mode is permanent and cannot be changed without starting a new game. Stuck on a relic challenge you can't beat without a faster character? Tough shit, you guys start all over. As a side note, I would very much like to see someone 101% this game with a turning class, which everyone agrees is objectively the worst. Every racing game after this let you switch characters more freely with time. In Adventure Mode, you don't have a level select screen. Instead, you have a hub world that you can drive around freely in to get a feel for the controls before being thrown into the fray. I love hub worlds. God, I'm a sucker. As you clear races and beat bosses, you earn keys that open doors to new hubs. Wait, that sounds... Nah, to unlock new tracks, you have to earn trophies. It's not like Crash 2 and 3 where you can play any level you want in any order. Each hub only gives you the choice of 2 tracks starting out, then the third once those 2 are beat, and then the 4th. Why the limitation? Just let me play Sewer Speedway first, what's the big deal? As you progress, Aku Aku, or Uka Uka depending on which side you chose, will teach you how to play the game. But the way they talk and the way they move is so unsettling.
Welcome to the Adventure Arena. You can travel around this area and practice your driving skills. The dots and stars on the map represent warp pads, which lead to races.
What's with the weird pauses? What's with the stiff animation? I mean, yeah, they're wood, but they still have less flexibility than in the previous game. I'm guessing they created this animation as a means of faux lip syncing like some other games use, but realized too late that it doesn't fit all the dialogue, so they stunted the audio to make it fit. Very cheap. Anyway, after you beat all 4 races in a hub, you gain access to the boss, and let me tell you, these bosses all cheat. They all have infinite power-ups, so the game becomes less about doing well and more about just waiting till the last lap before capping their ankles with a missile and driving past before they automatically catch up and pass you. Oh, did I forget to mention this game uses rubber banding? If you don't know the term, rubber banding is when the difficulty of the game changes in response to how well you do. If you're behind, the AI gets slower, and if you're ahead, the AI gets faster. It's supposed to keep the game from being too hard or too easy, but all the bosses are exactly the same as a result of this. The only difference between them is the tracks you race on, some of which are more difficult than others. I've never liked rubber banding. I wish they acted more like the time trial ghosts. In time trial mode, you can race non-interactable ghosts, including one of your best time, and just try to get to the tracks as quickly as possible. N-Tropy from Crash 3 is one of these ghosts, and if you beat him on every track, you can unlock him as a playable character. Although these high scores are all maxed out, so I don't think the devs had much expectation from you. But like I was saying, this is how the bosses should work. It should just be a fair race to the finish against a difficult opponent where you can master a track and earn the right to progress, rather than just having to outwit a cheater. After you beat all the bosses, you earn the right to face Oxide, and he is the biggest cheater of all. He goes right before the race actually starts and gets an unfair lead, and he can switch between his infinite power-ups as the race progresses. What is with racing games and having bosses that cheat? I thought Oxide was supposed to be the best racer in the galaxy, but he's a fraud. Oh well, his tournament, his rules, I guess. When you beat him, he flies off in a huff and says that unless you collect all the time relics, you'll never be able to claim you're the fastest. So now you have to do relic challenges, which are different from time trials in this game in order to get the secret ending. They function much the same as in Crash 3. You just have to finish 3 laps as quickly as possible while also hitting time crates to freeze the clock. If you hit every time crate, your total gets a bonus 10-second deduction, which is a neat prize. Beat the target times, get the relics, and challenge Oxide again for the secret ending, which is, well, I have a confession to make. When I was playing the original CTR for this review, I was so bad at it that I could barely get any relics at all. Just getting one Sapphire relic takes all of my effort, and since I can't change classes mid-adventure, I don't even know if my character was the problem. This is gonna be a recurring theme for me in Crash Bandicoot season, but don't worry, I make up for it later. My complete ineptitude aside, if you're attempting this, you may notice that there is one track that cannot be accessed unless you get all 5 colored gems, which also return in this game. To get the gems, you need to beat the 5 gem cups, but how do you access them? Why, by collecting all 20 CTR tokens, of course. How do you get tokens? By completing CTR challenges, which require you to win a race while simultaneously collecting the letters C, T, and R hidden around the track. But wait, there's only 16 tracks for CTR challenges. The remaining 4 tokens are gotten from crystal challenges, which are special arenas in which you have a limited time to get all the crystals. So, once you get all the crystals, and all 20 CTR tokens, and all 5 colored gems, you can finally get 1 relic. Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit. There are other rewards for doing all of this. Beating the gem cups unlocks more playable characters, like the bosses. You can unlock Ripperoo, Papu Papu, Komodo Joe, but not Komodo Mo, Pinstripe, and Oxide? No? No. Fake Crash. Don't know who Fake Crash is? Well, in the Crash Bandicoot manga, there's a scene where Cortex disguises himself as Crash. Poorly. Naughty Dog took that design and turned it into this weird Easter egg character that you can find hiding in Crash 3. And then they made him playable. And on Uka Uka's team, because this game really needed more villains. But he's not even the weirdest character you can unlock. There is another one that can only be unlocked using a cheat code. Who is it? Is it Embryo? Koala Kong? Tana? Komodo Mo? No, silly. It's Penta Penguin! I mean, how could you not guess that? He was only the most important original character in the manga released only in Japan. I mean, how stupid do you have to be not to expect? You've probably noticed that I keep bringing up Tana's absence. Well, if Naughty Dog were as big a fan of the manga as they seem, they probably also adopted the idea that Tana left Crash for Pinstripe, and that's why we don't see her anymore. Is this canon? We may never know, since this was the last Crash game Naughty Dog made. What I do know is that Tana's bombastic bosom was not the reason she was left out. Because of this. Every time you win a race, one of 4 original trophy girls shakes their tits at you. I'll admit that is a good motivation. There's Isabella, who rewards the bandicoots, Megumi, who rewards the evil scientists, Liz rewards the 2 pharaohs, and Amy, who is apparently the reverse harem type, rewards everyone else. But can we stop for a second to understand that Naughty Dog made 4 original female characters for this game, and instead of making any of them playable, we got Pura and Polar. I'm sorry, but I just cannot let that decision go. There were so many better alternatives, and they didn't use any of them. But all of these are personal gripes. Yeah, I was bad at the game when I played it, and I really think they could have put more effort into the playable roster, but this is not a bad game. Far from it. It's very well designed, and there's a reason people were still playing it regularly for a whole 20 years after it came out, up until its long-due remake. The music, I'm gonna be honest, is not as memorable as that from the original trilogy. It could be that there's too much action and noise going on for me to pay attention to it, but even listening to it on its own, I'm not particularly enthralled. Cortex Castle and Hot Air Skyway are okay, and Tiger Temple is really good too, but my favorite song is the ending theme, which itself is a medley of all the Crystal Challenge themes. There's one song in the game titled Scrapbook, which is a medley mix of the main themes from all 4 Crash games made by Naughty Dog. It has a very touching tone and really feels like a send-off to the series by the developers. More evidence that they likely weren't trying to destroy Crash. For now, I'm giving the game a 6 out of 10. I don't know why I don't have as much fun with this game as the others. When I was a kid, I used to always say that I loved kart racers, and that CTR was my favorite. I even somehow managed to beat the whole game without knowing how to power slide. More on that later. I guess I was just more persistent at the time. It also didn't help that there was no online at the time and I had no one to play against but the AI.
You don't have any friends!
And I think maybe CTR was just my favorite by default, because all I had to compare it to were Mario Kart, which I didn't like, Mickey's Racing Adventure, and Speed Punks. Yeah, but do not fret. We will be coming back to this game later in the season, so stay tuned.
Crash Bash!
Ah, there's the Crash 3 theme. I had a feeling we'd be hearing that again. I offhandedly mentioned Crash Bash in my Wrath of Cortex review. I said that the game made me so dizzy that I was actually sick and vomiting for a couple days. This was the first time a video game ever made me physically unable to play it. Well, I decided against trying to complete the game and settled on just reaching the end, so here we are. What is Crash Bash? Well, it's the second Crash Bandicoot game to not be developed by Naughty Dog. The first is Crash Bandicoot 99X, a Tiger Electronics game that I do not have the ability to play. I mean, I could buy it, I guess, but it'd be difficult to get decent footage of. Also, don't scroll down if you're searching on eBay, because you might find things you weren't looking for, but if you want to search it anyway, I mean, I'm not gonna judge. Crash Bash is a mission-based party game, so like Mario Party, but without the board. It uses a floor-to-floor hub system like in Crash 2, where you clear all the levels in a hub, beat the boss, and progress to the next. And all the levels, including the bosses, are minigames. The story is that Aku Aku and Uga Uga are just hanging out in some kind of space temple where they get into a fight and are about to duke it out like in Crash 3, but Aku says,
No, Uka Uka. The ancients would not allow it. There can be no malice between us.
I'm sorry, what? The two of you were like fucking Gohan and Cell in the last game. Why are you both pansying out now? They decide if they can't fight each other, then they'll get their subordinates to play games against each other instead. The two of them summon their teammates, with Aku only summoning Crash and Coco, completely ignoring Pura, Polar, Tana, and Embryo for some reason, while Uka summons a whole boatload of guys, including Cortex, Tiny, Dingodile, Koala Kong, Embryo, oh there he is, and a brand new character named Rillaroo. Really? Why was a new character necessary? Where's N-Tropy, Uka Uka's most competent minion? Where's N-Jin, Ripperoo, the Komodo brothers, Papu Papu? Well, they are in the game, but they serve as bosses and minigame obstacles. Except for N-Tropy, he's not in this. Neither is Pinstripe. Instead we get Rillaroo. Anyway, Aku Aku says that the teams are not balanced, and that Xehanort must defect 2 of his 13 teammates to Aku's side. So, who does he hand over? Tiny and Dingodile. Why them? They tried to kill us in the last game. Why not Embryo and the new fucker? You could easily write them in as good guys. This story makes no goddamn sense. So the way adventure mode works is similar to CTR. You pick a character, and the cutscenes you get are dependent on which team they're on. And like CTR, you cannot change characters, not even to another on your own team, for the entirety of the story mode. While that was a huge problem in CTR, they managed to balance it quite well this time. Every character in the game has hidden stats that make them different from each other. Some throw boxes farther, while others can spin them farther. Every character has different weapons in the tank minigames, and so forth. So it doesn't matter who you pick, you just need to learn what your strengths and weaknesses are. But if you're playing single player, the entire game consists of just you and 3 randomly chosen members of the other team. Okay, so where are the other 3 members of my team and the last member of the other team? Are they doing their own thing somewhere else, or did they all get benched? And why is it 3v1? That's hardly fair. The only way to make it 2v2 is to play co-op, which, like your choice of character, is also permanent. If you start in co-op, you have to finish in co-op. But there's this really cool feature the game has, where if both players are on opposite teams, like Crash and Cortex for example, then when the game is beaten, they'll access a completely exclusive tiebreaker match that cannot be played any other way, preceded by a unique cutscene. Whoever's team wins decides which ending you get. If Aku's team wins, the crystals you've collected up to this point are sealed away forever, where Uka can't get to them. And if Uka's team wins, he uses the crystals to summon a massive space storm with which to destroy and ultimately conquer the galaxy, for now there is no stopping him. Are you fucking serious? This game actually has an ending where the bad guys win. Like, really win. And not some stupid cop-out where they're like, oops, guess everything's okay after all. No, Uka just fucking wins. None of the other games have anything like that. That's really awesome. Also, the big plot twist is that the whole reason Uka is being so cooperative with Aku is because he's using the tournament as a means to trick the heroes into gathering the crystals for him. It's also why Tiny and Dingodile seem okay with being on Aku's team, because they're like double agents. So in the end, the story actually does make sense. Mostly, you still get the good ending if Tiny or Dingodile win. Well, maybe the manual can shed some more light on the story. Even though I do technically own Crash Bash, I do not have the manual, so I had to look up a PDF. Well, the story synopsis is pretty much the same. Oh, but hey, there's character profiles. Let's see. Some star power. No one is faster, smarter, and more agile than Crash. Who made this game? Eurocom. Are you alright in the head? You do know who Crash Bandicoot is, don't you? He's the character whose entire personality is that he has severe brain damage. But hey, who knows? Maybe Crash is like Reuben from Lilo and Stitch. He's actually the strongest and smartest character in the whole series, he just never really shows it. Also, while we're looking at the manual, I just want to point out that it spoils the final boss. I'm done talking about the story, let's move on to the actual gameplay. So, not counting bosses or the bonus tiebreaker, the game has 28 levels, with 4 levels for each of the 7 minigame types. The first is ballistics, which is like 4-player air hockey. Second is polar push, where everyone's on the back of a polar bear and has to push the others off of a big ice block. Third is Pogo Pandemonium, a fun game where players rack up points by coloring the squares. Fourth is Crate Crush, a battle where you try to fucking kill each other with boxes, TNT, and other weapons.
There can be no malice between us.
Fifth is Tank Wars, which is about struggling to learn the tank's controls only to realize that the enemy has already killed themselves by the time you've figured them out. Sixth is Crash Dash, which is like a racing game with tank controls. And no rails. And last is Medieval Mayhem, which is more of a miscellaneous category as they're all completely different. Each variation of each minigame has different rules and each has 5 different missions to complete. The first mission will earn you a trophy, and you need all of them to access the hub's boss. Getting a trophy is always the same process, just win 3 times before anyone else does. But with 4 participants, that means these fucking games can go on for 9 rounds. And if you lose, you have to start all over again. I really wish you only had to win once or maybe twice. One saving grace they have is that if you fail early, you don't have to sit around and watch the rest of the match play out. You can skip it and let the game choose a random victor from the survivors. The second and third missions will get you gems and crystals, and as you progress, bosses will require those as well. These missions only require you to win once, but with severe handicaps, such as having less health than the others, needing to score more points, or being unable to use one of the mechanics. Near the end of the game, you gain the ability to try earning gold relics, which require you to win twice in a row, and platinum relics, which require you to win thrice in a row. It's a pain and a grind to get to that 201% mark. Yes, it's 201% in this game, higher than any of the others. I really don't get the Crash series tradition of always having higher percentages than 100. That's not how percentages work. The bosses don't have missions. All you had to do is beat them once, and each one is themed around one of the other minigames. Papu Papu is Crate Crush, the giant polar bear from Crash 2, whose name is apparently the Bearminator, is based on Polar Push. The Komodo brothers, yes, both are here, are themed around Tank Wars and have this awesome multi-phase fight. And Nitrous Oxide is a 2-phase mission that starts with an original Space Chase type level, then finishes with Okay, time out. I need to talk about something personal. Ballistics. I hate ballistics. This level right here, the N-Ballism Crystal Challenge, is the level that made me sick. Just staring at it, failing at it, focusing on it, trying to concentrate on it. This game seeped into my peripheral vision and subconscious until it was all I could think about. I tried everything. I tried save states. I tried having other people try and beat it for me. I tried looking up guides and video tutorials, but nothing worked. Headaches, nausea, dizziness, and ultimately vomiting, which lasted for 2 days. This level harmed me. I had to step away from the game for a few months, and only just recently returned to finish it. So, how do you think I felt when I got to the final boss and found out it was this? I felt like my PTSD was triggered, like my demons came back to be conquered. I didn't even care anymore. I save-stated my way through it, and even then it was extremely difficult for me. And once I beat it and saw the ending, I was done. Done forever. Potentially. Unless someone wants to go 2-play with me, I'd actually be down for that.
You don't have any friends!
Anyway, some last notes. The graphics are okay. They look like the other Crash games, but for being a PS1 game from late 2000, they're kinda bad compared to other games of the time, but it's the art direction that ultimately matters. And the music! My god, Crash Bash's OST is amazing. It was composed by Steve Duckworth, and in my honest opinion, his work completely blows away that of Mark Mothersbaugh and Josh Mansell. A lot of the songs are remixes of songs from previous Crash games, but the original ones are fantastic too. Crash Bash has such a good soundtrack, I even threw one in as an honorable mention in my top 10 songs from the trilogy video. As I write this, I am sitting here listening to the OST and not skipping a single song, which if you ask anyone who knows me, is very unusual. I'm always constantly skipping through playlists if I'm not completely enamored by what I'm hearing. Just go listen to it. The whole thing, it's great. So for Crash Bash, I think I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10 as well. It's not a bad game at all. I would like it a lot more if it didn't hurt to play it, but like I said, I wouldn't mind playing it again with a second player. It has a pretty big fan base from what I've seen, and lots of people clamoring for the remake treatment that CTR got. So maybe we'll just have to see.
Crash Bandicoot, the Wrath of Cortex.
Insert Wrath of Cortex review that I already did here, link in the card. Hey, it's the Crash 3 theme. Again. The Huge Adventure was the first of the Game Boy Advance titles, and the first to be developed
by Vicarious Visions.
Yeah, the same peeps who did the Insane trilogy. They've been working on this series longer than anyone else, it seems. The story this time is that Cortex has developed a machine that shrinks the planet down to the size of a small fruit, with him lording over it as its new god. Coco says she can make a device to reverse the effects if Crash collects all the crystals, which were also shrunk, and apparently didn't lose any of their potency. So cue the typical Crash formula. You have multiple hubs with 5 levels each, collect the crystals from each one, and then you can fight the bosses, which give you the power-ups that you lost in the previous games for some reason. These bosses, again, were also shrunk. If I had to guess, I'd say they were kept on Earth just to keep Crash from getting the crystals, which means Cortex knew that might be a problem, but didn't come up with a better contingency plan for it. Also, the final boss is just Cortex, who is also shrunk? Or are we actual size here? What is going on? But yeah, structure-wise, everything's exactly as you'd expect. You get colorless gems by breaking all the crates, relics for beating the stages quickly, and colored gems hidden throughout that let you access more colorless gems. When you beat the game initially, you get a bad ending that shows the planet being returned to normal size, but Cortex's machine hasn't been destroyed, so you have to go get 100% to get the true ending. And when you do, something unexpected happens. A first for the series, you get more than just a new ending. You also get a brand new final boss. After you destroy Cortex's machine, it malfunctions and the freed energy or something causes Cortex and his minions to get fused together into a horrible monstrosity called Megamix. This unique final boss is not only a chase sequence, but it also doubles as an actual stage with a box counter from which you earn one final gem. It's actually pretty freaking awesome and is the highlight of the game in my opinion. After you escape from its clutches, Megamix defuses somehow, and they all escape in a pod. Their fate left a mystery. Kind of a lame ending, but the whole story is kind of lame overall. And then the credits roll. Infinitely. Until you make them stop. Okay. You know, Cortex, if you were truly an evil mastermind, this is what you would do to keep Crash from wrecking everything.
Attention, people of Earth. If anyone sees any bipedal bandicoots running around, capture or kill them and bring them to me. You will be rewarded with a country of your own choosing. Oh, and Crash, I know you can hear me, and I am watching you. I know you're collecting crystals, and for every one you collect, I will poke the planet with my pinky finger, potentially destroying hundreds of hospitals and orphanages. You don't want innocent blood on your hands, right? So keep that in mind, won't you, dearie?
That's what he should do. What? The graphics, I would admit, look pretty damn good for the GBA. They used the Donkey Kong Country method of using 3D models as a base for 2D sprites, which let them look very well animated. But I think they may have been using this method as a crutch to rush the graphics. A lot of environmental elements still have very noticeable artifacting, and the tile sets look like someone went to hell with the clone stamp tool. Everything is very splotchy. Also, in an attempt to make it look more 3D, all platforms and boxes have these isometric edges that make it very difficult to tell where their hitboxes are. This is easily the second worst part of the game. The worst part are all the blind jumps that plague it. There are so many of these. Most of the time, the game does a good job of guiding you through the void with moving platforms and wumpa trails. And other times it expects you to just fucking go for it. I know the GBA has a tiny screen, but all you had to do was shorten Crash's jump distance and you can shorten the gaps between platforms too. The music for this game was composed/arranged by Manfred Linsner and Todd Maston. I say arranged because almost none of this game's music is original. They're all taken from the first 4 games and remixed for the GBA. Admittedly, they do sound really good, but by now you're probably as tired as I am of every Crash game just riding off the popularity of the originals. Although they did do this neat thing where they swapped the boss themes for Tiny, Dingodile, and N-Gen. A foreshadowing of Megamix, perhaps? Overall, I'm giving this game a 5 out of 10. It's not a bad game, but it was just so boring. One of the easiest Crash games I've ever completed, and almost no original content is here. It's all just copy-pasted from previous games. The hardest parts were getting the relics for these stupid fucking polar bear stages, and you already know how I feel about moving toward the camera. Imagine having to do so in a time trial. I don't really have any desire to play it again, but I don't hate it. Moving on. Oh hey, what do you know, it's the Crash 3 theme, again. Okay guys, that's really getting, oh, wait a second. Crash Bandicoot 2 n-tranced. Why did they call it Crash 2? I get that it's a sequel to the first GBA game, but we already have a Crash 2 that has nothing to do with this one. That's just gonna confuse people. Crash 2 n-tranced is difficult to place chronologically as it takes place both after Wrath of Cortex and the Huge Adventure, which must have happened in that order since Cortex and his lackeys are still lost in space and Crunch is here now, but he wasn't in the Huge Adventure, and Twinsanity is a direct sequel to Wrath of Cortex, which would make that a prequel to the Huge Adventure. You know what? It's just best not to think about it. Anyway, n-tranced is a really unique game in the series in that Cortex and the other villains are not in it due to being lost in space. Instead, the main villains are N-Tropy and a new character named N-Trance, Master of Hypnotism. Tropy uses his time powers to witness a future where he successfully sways the bandicoots to his side and believes the way to achieve this destiny is to brainwash them. Working together with N-Trance, they open up portals with which to kidnap Coco and Crunch. As soon as Aku Aku realizes what's happening, he stops Crash from being kidnapped. But while Crash is being pulled through the portal, a new Crash materializes as a result. Fake Crash. That's right, n-tranced provides an origin story for him. The fake Crash fools Tropy and Trance, and their 3 prisoners are brainwashed into being evil. Shh, not now. So now it's up to Crash to rescue his friends. The first level of the game is actually a tutorial level, a first in the series. And oh, what's this? Crash kept his double jump from the previous game. This game started a new tradition in which Crash starts nearly every game with the ability to double jump. In fact, learning new abilities becomes less of a thing with time from this point forward. But this game does introduce 2 unique power-ups that only appear in this game, the Super Jump and the Super Slide. Both are cool ideas, but they're only useful in very specific situations, and you can't double jump off of a super jump, so it's not even good for platforming. Game probably could have done without it. There are also these new time-stopping crates that freeze enemies and obstacles for a limited time, but they're never placed in particularly advantageous locations, and they don't last long enough to be useful, not even in time trials. You can actually skip them all and you'll be fine. When you beat the first level, you get taken to this strange magical space island that acts as the game's hub world, with branching paths, with levels that you must clear to progress. All paths eventually lead to the boss, which as usual cannot be accessed until the previous levels are all beat. Gameplay is more or less identical to the previous game, and those horrible platform edges are still here, but you may notice something after playing for a while, and that's the levels are way better designed, both visually and mechanically. The Egyptian and Arabian stages are especially stunning to behold, with multi-layered parallax backgrounds, and I don't remember encountering any completely blind jumps in my playthrough. The worst looking stages are these water ski levels. While the water animation looks fantastic, the Mode 7 objects are layered poorly. Things that are in front of Crash often look like they're behind him, so you end up running into them. The Atmosphere stages from Wrath of Cortex also return on this, with new mechanics like braking and accelerating to give you a lot more control over your movement, though the level design was still better in Wrath. And look at this sprite. Is it even a sprite? Is it a 3D model? If it is a sprite, how many frames does it have? It's really impressive. But you know what's more impressive? They made 2 of them. After you beat the first boss, which is Evil Crunch, and free him from the mind control, again, you unlock him as a playable character, but he's only playable in the Atmosphere stages. Similarly, defeating and freeing Evil Coco will unlock her as playable too, making this the first traditional game in the series with 3 playable characters. The third boss is Fake Crash, who acts as a sort of doppelganger. He mirrors your every movement and hurts you on contact, but the stage itself is asymmetrical. You have to guide him into traps in order to hurt him. I honestly thought this was extremely clever and unique for a Crash boss. The colored gems are in this game, but they're handled in a very different way. Before, there was only one of each gem, and each one was hidden in just one level, and once you found it, that was it. It was yours. But n-tranced has the colored gems split into fragments, so they're spread across way more levels, encouraging you to explore them more thoroughly and having a greater number of rewards. What is the reward for collecting them all? We'll get to that. Speaking of gems, you can obtain them during time trials again. So if you miss one, you can just hit restart trial and you won't have to leave the level. You can also save time by getting gems and relics simultaneously. Take that, rather, Cortex. Bonus stage platforms actually carry you to your destination, whereas they just teleported you in the previous game. Any extra lives that you can't reach get automatically added to your total, and you get save prompts after every level, because I guess auto-saving wasn't perfected yet. There were just so many improvements. It's almost like they actually learned from their mistakes in the previous game. The hardest level in the entire game is Rock the Cassava. There's a mechanic in Crash games where if you die enough times, you'll respawn with a mask. And I don't know if this was present in the other games too, because I've never died enough times for it to be a thing, but if you die even more times after that, you'll respawn with 2 masks. Die enough times after that, and you'll actually spawn with invincibility. And even with that, I was still dying. The culprit is these goddamn ropes. You press up to grab onto them, and then have to continuously press up to keep from slipping down. Getting the right timing to avoid falling off takes incredible precision. And it doesn't help that it took me 26 minutes to figure out that you can just spin between the ropes. After you rescue the hypnotized bandicoots, the final boss, quote-unquote, is n-tranced himself, and boy is he hard. Hardest boss in a Crash game I'd ever fought at that point, not counting CTR. He's got 2 phases, and if you die in either one, you have to start the whole fight over. You're supposed to use the super jump to dodge his attacks in the first phase, but I learned his pattern so well that I can beat him without it. In the second phase, it turns into a bullet hell with pinball elements, and if that doesn't make it sound hard, there's something wrong with you. The objective is to knock him into this corner where Fake Crash will pour lava on him. That's really cool, how Fake Crash turned against his creator. Like original, like clone. But what about Entropy? He's still free and working toward making that vision he saw come true. Well, remember the colored gems? If you collect them all, not only do you unlock the second ending, and not only do you unlock the true final boss, but you also unlock an entire last hub world. Truly, n-tranced had the best post-game content in the series at that point. The last hub contains some of the most difficult stages in the game, but none as difficult as Rock the Cassava. When you beat them all, you get to fight Entropy, in a direct reference to his fight from Crash 3. There's even a remix of his theme playing, and parts of this remix were used in the Insane Trilogy's version of the song. It's the song that keeps on growing, so hit him 3 times and he's done, right? No. After you beat him, you're warped to a second time period and must fight him again, faster and with new attacks. Hit him 3 more times and you're warped to a third time period, where he's so fast and has such specific attacks that you'll get hit if your timing isn't perfect. 3 phases, and you have to start from the beginning if you die, but he's not hard. He has the exact same pattern every time, so there's no RNG or surprises. This whole thing is actually really cool. It's nice seeing Entropy get the attention he deserves. When you beat him, Crash and friends take a picture with the now defeated Entropy to mock him, and it's here we realize that this is the vision he saw, which wouldn't have come true had he just let the Bandicoots be. Self-fulfilling prophecies are a bitch, huh, Tropy? And then the credits roll. Infinitely. Again. Why? After beating the game, which you may have noticed did not require the time relics this time, I went back to try and get them, just for completionist's sake. I got a few of them, including this really difficult one where you have to fall through most of the stage as fast as you can. I spent so long on this stage that I encountered several bugs, which were the only bugs I found in the entire game. But the atmosphere stages, I was completely unable to do. Those stages are more fun when done slowly, taking your time. But rushing through it requires a lot of cycle memorization that I'm just not built for. And since I already don't like time trials and they're not needed for the best ending, I gave up trying to get the relics in this one. As for the music, it's more or less the same as The Huge Adventure and is also composed by Manfred Linzner. Half of it is comprised of older songs while the other half are new, but let me tell you, this soundtrack is much better than The Huge Adventures. The new songs are better, like the wakeboard theme, and the remixes are amazing too. It has the best remix of the Crash 3 theme I've ever heard, and the Arabian theme is particularly well done. That faster paced bass line just makes it so exciting compared to the original. So yeah, it may be too difficult for me to complete, but this is still one of the best Crash games I've ever played, and it's definitely the best out of all the GBA games. There were just so many improvements made from the last game, and also from the original trilogy. Overall, I'm giving this game a 7 out of 10. If any of the 2D Crashes get remade, it should be this one. I may not have been able to 100% it, but it was still a load of fun and I'd definitely like to play it again someday. Alright, that's gonna conclude part 1 of Crash Bandicoot season. Hope you enjoyed, and if you did, be sure to subscribe if you're not already and share this video with your friends. Until next time, I'll be here, in the darkness, quietly awaiting your return.